What's up, everybody? I'm here with Aaron Turner. How are you doing, brother?
I'm well, Eddie. Thank you. I think like many people, just getting through the days and enjoying what I can in life while pondering the larger existential anxiety and social issues and global issues and pandemic issues. So I was trying to keep everything in balance.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I mean, things haven't changed much in the last 5 months for people. Things are still locked down. The virus is still out there, and yeah, like you said, as existential dread is starting to creep up. Because like the first few months, I was doing okay. I was like, I could use some time away from spending money and going out and save some money and whatnot. But it's not looking promising. So it's kind of like we're trying to keep it together.
Yeah, there's that, and then weird secret police snatching people off the streets. I mean,
Hmm.
to
Yeah,
say
man.
that that is alarming is an understatement. So yeah, these are very dynamic, interesting times we're living in.
Yeah, because it's not just the virus and the lockdown; it's all the other, like you said, secret police, and then we got like the elections coming up, and they don't know what's happening. Like, are we going to vote by mail? Are we going to delay it? Are we going to, Oh, and then we got Biden as the competition or whatever to Trump, and like, but they're all bad. It's
Yeah,
like, what are
yeah,
we doing?
certainly Biden would have been my first pick, but this is an easy choice to make in the
Mhm.
sense that there's no question that Trump, I don't even like saying his name, and I don't want to get off on that because I feel
Right,
like
right.
part of the problem is so many people pay attention to him rather than the problems he represents.
Yeah.
But I will say that his presence has exacerbated some already big problems. The other facet of this, which I try to keep my mind on, is that it's brought some things to light that had been lingering in the shadows for a long time, and it's really, I think it's brought a level of awareness and attention to stuff that needs to be addressed now. And I'm hopeful and I'm optimistic that we are on the cusp of some really good changes, but it's good. There's going to be some upheaval and some chaos and some suffering in the meantime.
Well, yeah, yeah. I mean, that's just the basis of, I guess, existence. Really, the whole process of tearing something down so you can rebuild it better. Even with like, if you want to break it down to simple terms, even with a house, you buy a house and you'll find like a little piece of black mold somewhere or some kind of broken thing, and you just tear everything out and remodel, and then you got a better house to live in. And that's
Yeah,
just kind of how we have to do it. It's you know that's kind of how he got in office with that whole rhetoric of like, let's drain the swamp. It's like,
yeah,
you're,
yeah.
you're part of the swamp, buddy.
Yeah, or you're just using code for some really racist shit that
Yeah.
you're trying to get a really weird sector energized with. But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah,
I'm
I don't like bringing up politics during the
no,
podcast.
I'm fine with politics. I think my, like I said, my issue is just that there's this fixation on him, and he is a problem. There is no doubt about that. But as I said, it's what he represents that is truly the problem. And I think so many people get swept up in his antics that the larger issues get swept aside. And I think the other problem is a lot of people get swept up in hating him, and uh, I understand that because there are times when I feel that I feel negative feelings towards him, and that is totally understandable. At the same time, I also really believe that fostering positive energy and connecting with other people and connecting with our allies and making connections that are based off a foundation of love is a way more positive use of energy, and just getting caught up in hate is just going to perpetuate the problem.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's not like you said, it's not just him because people do focus on him because he's such a, he's a charismatic figure. Obviously,
And a caricature. I
he's
mean,
a
the guy is a
caricature.
fucking cartoon. I've been you read literature or comics or anything from 20, 30 years ago, and literally the idea of the totalitarian Republican leader that is portrayed from those fictional standpoints of decades ago is pretty much an accurate representation of where we are and who's in charge at the moment.
Yeah, 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 and it's a reflection, really. I've told a lot of people this, and they don't like it. They get mad at me, but it's like, that we have Trump based on it's a reflection, really, on the majority of Americans. Like, we live in a society now with the internet, thankfully, that a lot of people just troll. They feed
Yeah,
off of this anger, and like
yeah.
they feed off of bullying people online, like, just, oh, your opinion sucks, that band sucks, or this album sucks, or everything is this angry troll-like behavior. And now we have this leader of the
The
nation that,
head troll.
yeah, he's like the head troll. So, I've told people before, I'm like, not you specifically, but like, those people deserve what we have. It's basically that reflection of society right now. And like you
I,
said, if we would spend our energy more on loving each other and helping each other, things would be way different, I think.
I'll disagree with you just a little bit in that I don't think it's the majority of Americans. I think it's a very vocal part
Okay.
of the
Yeah.
population. And I would also say that just amongst the community that I'm a part of, a lot of the people I know who are super active in really important ways don't spend time on social media, or they don't spend very much time on social media. I think in a lot of ways, social media can be a productive way to share information and connect. I also think it's a gathering place for a lot of people who don't have another outlet and need a channel for their aggression and for their negativity. And so a lot of the people that are represented on social media, the trolls, the people that are just stirring shit up, don't represent the larger populace. They represent a demographic that is drawn to this form of communication specifically because it offers them the comfort of anonymity in which they can, get their hatred out towards other people, which I
Yeah.
really believe is based off of self-loathing that's externalized. But anyway.
No, it's true. It's true 100%, man. And I'm always at a weird, like, conflict with myself with social media, because I don't like it. I agree with you. It's a vocal majority of trolls that live there, but it's also kind of the guiding force behind, like, culture in America. Like,
That's true.
that's how we, you look at movies and video games and other things like that, they'll put something out on social media, and if everybody hates on it, then they make changes. So
Yeah.
it dictates, like, where things are going. It's weird.
Yeah, there's no doubt that it's very influential, and as I said, it does have its merits. I mean, a lot of what we've seen about what's happening in terms of positive protest, a lot of what we've seen in terms of the abuse of power by police has only come to light through social media, because
Hmm.
major media is not sharing it. So it's in one way it's empowered people to share news, and I think real news, and I think that that's not to be discounted.
Yeah.
I think I'm more just talking about the people who get involved in, Twitter battles and,
YouTube
just
comments.
YouTube comments. Like, yeah, the sort of the classic zones you think of when you think of where the trolls reside.
Yeah. Yeah, it's weird, man. I don't know how we can fix it either, because you look at certain companies are doing things like Twitter and Facebook where they're taking down posts or blocking
Yeah.
posts that are fake news or whatever it may be, but then people complain like, "Oh, you're infringing on my rights. Like, how dare you?" It's like, oh my God, we
Yeah,
can't win.
well, I mean, you most often hear that from, I'm sorry to generalize here, but you most often hear that from angry white people. And I,
Yeah,
I, we've dominated the conversation in this country for hundreds of years now, and we need to fucking step aside. And if white people are getting their feelings hurt because they don't get to say mean, hateful shit, fuck them. I mean, I realize that is antithetical to my statement about love and everything, but I really
yeah,
just like, you know, my wife and partner Faith pointed this out. There was protests from people when they were required to wear seatbelts. When seatbelts first became a legal thing, people thought their rights were being infringed on. And what I think a lot of the people who are complaining don't understand is that the freedom they've enjoyed to say hateful things about the people they're oppressing is not true freedom, because it prevents other people from having freedom. So it's just like this really backwards, childish, selfish way of looking at things. And I think it's all just a way of deflecting from their own discomfort about where we are, and an inability to truly love themselves. Because I really don't think that people who love themselves in a real, meaningful, and sincere way would be able to honestly hate other people. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree with you. I agree. And it's also discipline too. Like I know that I learned a lot when I was studying martial arts and all that, because of the discipline they teach you, not the violence part of it, but just kind of the self-control and self-evaluation in a situation. Like most martial arts people that I know aren't violent. They don't go around
Yeah.
punching people. You know what I mean? It teaches them to analyze the situation and try to diffuse it before using the tools that they've been taught. And people don't have any of that. Most people don't have any of that.
I think that's true. And I was also just thinking that, now it's just starting to get to the point where on a systemic level, racism is being recognized as a health crisis. And so I think that's really important that distinction is made. And going back to what you said about the people complaining about freedom of speech, if we're thinking of racism in those terms as being a health crisis, then what you have to look at what the causes of this health crisis are. And part of the cause would be the fact that racist speech, including by leaders of our country, has been allowed on social media platforms. And I think if you want to cure the problem and you're serious about it, there needs to be some clampdown on that kind of stuff. Yeah. So I don't know. I realize that one area we're discussing is murky, because it does start to get into other territory about censorship and freedom of speech, and those things are important to consider. But I think this idea that has been utilized about hate speech being a necessary part of public discourse is an abuse of the idea of what freedom of speech means, and antithetical to the actual idea of freedom.
Yeah, if we had maybe a leader that would educate people on that, but we don't have that. We don't have education that's worth a damn. Like, I mean, even schools, I know schooling is important, but they're not teaching the things that I think are, not, and obviously teach what I think is important. That sounds selfish, but I'm just saying there's certain things that are important that we don't learn in school, like that, like that kind of concept that, yes, freedom of speech is great, but it's also, if you're using hate speech, you're bringing down somebody else in the process. It needs to be a balance where all, the rising tide lifts all the ships, and not just the one side, because then it's out of balance,
Yeah. Well, I think that our country is very clearly divided in quite a few ways, and I am not under the illusion that those divides are going to be healed in the immediate future. I am hopeful that we are making steps in the right direction, and I'm also just aware that humanity is conflicted, and it is often at odds with itself as a collective, and also on an individual level. So, these are not things that are easily solved, or perhaps ever fully solvable. I do think that there is a lot of room for progress, and that this is a promising step in that potential progress. So we'll see where we go from here.
Yeah, and it's weird too, because you're an artist. You paint, you do music, a lot of music. I was looking at your resume. Like there's like at least 10 other bands that you're part of that I haven't heard, and I listen to a lot of your stuff.
Yeah.
But it's this kind of moment that we're in, this kind of conflict, this kind of problem that we're facing, does serve as fuel, I think, for creativity and to put out messages, to put out positive messages. Have you found yourself inspired? I know that Sumac's got new music coming, uh, but I mean, do you feel yourself inspired, or is this kind of weighing you down? Because I've talked to some people where they're like, I don't even feel inspiration to do anything. I'm just kind of like waiting.
I go back and forth, honestly. I feel like this whole experience has definitely been cyclic, for me, where there have been weeks where I felt super inspired and got a lot done, and then there are other weeks where I really was just sitting around staring off into space. And I'm not the first person to say this by any means. I think we are undergoing some kind of collective trauma from everything that's happening. And I think it's an understandable response to occasionally be paralyzed by that and need to take a step back to reflect on what's happening. And I don't know if relax is the right word, but I do think that we need to shut down at times in order to be able to realign ourselves to deal with what's happening. For me, I've been saying this in a few conversations lately. My interest in music and specifically, kind of getting on the path that I'm currently on, really got sparked when I discovered punk and hardcore in my early high school years. And part of my interest in it was based off of the socio-political angle of it. And so that's always been part of the framework of where I've been coming from. There are a lot of ways in which I felt like I was never well educated enough to speak my mind and to address political topics in a really specific way. But there's a level of social consciousness I've tried to maintain as part of my practice of being an artist, and that's been kind of a through line for me since the beginning. In the last few years, that's become more of a focal point for me, and I think it was especially pronounced when we were deep in the process of working on the last Sumac record. I just really was thinking about, how in some ways art can be very ambiguous for a lot of people. A lot of people can read a lot of things into it, and I like that there's some room for interpretation. I like that there is a whole spectrum of experience that people can have through, listening to my music or listening to anybody's music, and that it offers that freedom of experience and interior exploration. That said, there are certain aspects of doing what we do that were kind of troublesome to me. One is that metal has had a connotation as being really hateful in some ways, and I really wanted to make a distinction as far as what I do, that is not a part of this, that it's not a part of my message, it's not a part of my intent, it's not what my bandmates and I are collectively trying to communicate. That's not to say that we're shying away from exploring the darker aspects of our human selves, because I think addressing those parts of who we are and looking at those things is very important, even in terms of not being violent, aggressive, destructive people. But I really wanted to make it clear where we were coming from, and I've had some trepidation about, just spelling things out in such a clear way. I don't like having to make messages overly obvious, and sometimes there's the message for me is so personal that I don't want to just burden our listeners with my own personal perspective. That said, there were some, I think, universally relatable themes in what we were trying to do that I needed to make more clear. And one of them was that this whole thing is motivated by a desire to be connected to myself, to be connected to the people that I make music with, to make a connection to the people who are absorbing the music, and to express that all of this is based off of a love of being alive and a desire to perpetuate that feeling of love and joy through the act of creating. So, you know, that in itself isn't necessarily overtly political on some level. At the same time, I really wanted to make it clear that unlike some other artists and some other subgenres of metal, this was not about this individualistic, isolationist, exclusionary way of thinking. This was about being inclusive, about connectivity, and about purposely fostering this idea of increased empathy and kindness and awareness through the joy of art and the joy of music, and by extension the joy of being alive.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I see that, you know, and I have a unique experience in the metal world because I'm Cuban by family, and I grew up around a lot of Latinos and Cubans and whatnot, but I was always attracted to metal. And
Yeah.
all of my Cuban friends, my family friends, were always like, "Why are you so satanic and angry all the time?" I'm like, "I'm not. I'm not.
Yeah.
I love everyone." And if you join into the culture, like if you're part of it, you're at a show and something, you can see that actually kind of shine through. And like you're at a show and people are moshing and somebody falls, typically people always run over and pick them up and, "Hey, let's get up and let's do this together. Awesome."
Yeah.
You know, obviously there's exceptions with, you know, some of the dumb skinheads that go there to beat people up, but for the most part, it's a nice inclusive community. But it just kind of on the surface looks evil and violent and whatnot. Like, why are they always screaming? They always look so angry. I'm like, you're not paying attention to the message. But I definitely get that from your music, and you know, I was listening to the Iron Chair, the new song you put out for the new Sumac, and it's very experimental. Like like, how can I explain this without sounding dumb? But I think like after you guys did the collaboration with KG, like the music kind of shifted into a more experimental realm overall. Like I know he wasn't involved, or they weren't involved with this new project or new album, but it kind of feels like it's lingering there. This like open abstract kind of. There's no structure of the typical structure of, you know, verse, chorus, and, you know, groove and whatnot. It's kind of open. Am I right? It's like the whole album like that?
No, it's not.
Okay.
In fact, I wish I had sent you the whole record before our conversation. Anyway,
No, that's fine.
The more free style of playing that's come to the fore in Sumac in recent years was always part of my intention from the beginning. Not that we would ever become a fully improvisational unit, but just that would be part of our mode of operation. And it just took us a while to be able to get to a place where we felt like we were able to improvise in a way that felt natural and also produced listenable results. I mean, I've been doing that in various ways through other projects and through solo explorations, but never so much in the group context as has happened in recent years with Sumac. And for me, it's very liberating to be able to go down that path. And again, it's not that is the direction we're heading for all of the music that we want to create in the future. It's just another avenue of expression. And I think actually with the contrast between the stuff that is totally free and improvised, and then these structures we create that are very deliberate and meticulously composed, I feel like there's a whole tension and interesting balance that arises from those different approaches, and being able to move in and out of those different phases of musical existence. As I said, though I've been doing this on my own or in limited collaborations here and there in the past, what I really was inspired by to some degree was what I began to learn about myself as a player in my later years in ISIS, where we were doing a lot of touring. and we were playing the same material over and over, I was finding that these songs that, I had formerly had a lot of connection to started to feel lifeless to me through the process of just repeating them the same way over and over again. So after not being in a really full-time band for a few years after ISIS disbanded and thinking about starting my own band again, I used that lesson as part of the sort of background ideology for starting a new band. I knew that I wanted to be able to write in a way that allowed there to be a constant process of reinterpretation and reevaluation of the music, so that it was kind of like an ongoing dialogue between us as the creators or the channelers and the music itself. And that has really just this was kind of only a theory at that point, but the theory has been proven to be effective for me in that I can re-experience these songs in a new way every time we play them. And we've now given ourselves the option of spontaneous creation, so that if we don't even feel like adhering to, a version of a pre-existing idea, we can jump into something totally unknown. And my perspective ever since beginning to be in bands was that I needed to be engaged with what I was doing, and I needed to feel like it was constantly an outlet for true exploration. And so, that remains kind of central to my creative process. And that's why I really, I feel like it's true honesty for me to follow what feels right. And sometimes I have to play in a way that is totally uninhibited, and even risk potential failure of making something that may not be good, simply because it allows me and the music to be alive in that moment instead of just being a reiteration of something that's already happened.
Right. Yeah. That happens to a lot of bands. They keep, they get the record deal and they get like, oh, we got to put out 5 records, but they only have about 3 records full of material. And then they're like, well, we could just play around with the formula we got, and it just kind of starts dying. The art itself starts dying. Sumac's always been very challenging to listen to for me anyway. Like always got it and I loved it. But it challenged me personally, like listening to, even from the first song on that was, I forget the Thorn in the Lion's Paw, I think.
Yeah, from the first record. Yeah.
Even from the first record, like you listen to it and it's like, wow, this is heavy. The rhythm is a little bit off time. Like it caused me to think and look inside. So when you guys started going in a more experimental kind of improvised direction, it wasn't jarring. It wasn't like, oh no, what are they doing? It was more like, okay, wow, more challenge. Great. Let's do it. But I appreciate that you are willing to take those chances and, and I'm not saying that you did fail, but like you said, you take that risk of failing.
Yeah.
That's good, because the only way we learn and get better is by failing. I mean, you can't just live this lie in your head that everything you put out is, magical and great. Because then you become pompous,
Yeah. And I think that level of comfort and just feeling like, you're the master at what you do is what leads to stagnation. And, when I started thinking about what I wanted Sumac to be before it was even a band or who I knew I wanted to play with, I knew that it had to be set up in such a way that it could allow for longevity through the process of growth and evolution. I think that I like the idea of being in a band that can have not necessarily a career in the sense that you're able to make a living from it, but a career in the sense that you can create a body of work and you can create a series of statements that give a bigger picture of your artistic intent, who you are, and what you're trying to get across. I think, there's certainly been plenty of bands and musicians who have only made 1 or 2 records, and they're great records. Yet I always wonder about what more that group or that person had to say. So That's a long-winded way of saying that I wanted to set Sumac up in a way and give us the freedom to change and to explore so that we could continue on for a period of time and build up a body of work and really create something that was like a big picture look at what we could do and what could be said, and give it some more depth through a greater volume um, of creations. Essentially, a lot of the artists that I've enjoyed myself are people who created a lot of work, and who did change and evolve. And I think that evolution and that willingness to allow yourself to grow in parallel with the growth of your creation is really great. I mean, when you see bands who are doing the same thing that they were doing in their 20s, in their 50s, you kind of have to wonder, did they stop growing themselves, and did they get stuck in this version of themselves? And it's very rare, I would say almost non-existent, that there are people who have maintained that level of stylistic consistency while also coming across as being sincere and invigorated.
Nice. Yeah, I agree with you. And, a lot of it has to do, going back and circling to what we started talking about also, is fans and social media. Like, maybe some of these bands are just they try one thing off and then they get slammed by their fans online with like, what are you doing? Why are you going in that direction? What, where's the old, like Metallica is one of those examples where they're still going and fans are like, why? Like,
yeah.
And, it's rough, man, because artists should be free to do what they want and express themselves, as much as possible without the constraints of that. Like, I'm sure you got it. I'm sure you got tons of it when ISIS decided to disband, and like people like, bring it back, and freaking out about it. And by the way, thank you for putting together Celestial for Caleb's thing here in LA. I got to go. Thankfully, tickets sold out immediately, but thankfully one of my buddies had me a ticket, and I was like, yes.
Yeah.
But
we had to do it. I mean, Caleb was a very important friend to us, so being able to do that was crucial for us, I think.
Yeah, but I'm sure, like I was saying, that I'm sure you've gotten hounded online about bringing the band back, or what's going on, or that kind of thing, right?
Well, I mean, anytime you put your work into public, there's going to be lots of people who have opinions about it, and you can never do the right thing by everybody. And if you're trying to, you're going to arrive at some weird compromised middle ground that means nothing. So I think the best thing you can hope for as an artist is that you cultivate an audience that is willing to go along with you on whatever journey you decide to embark upon. And I think that with every band that I've been in, I and we have tried to some extent or another to let people know from the beginning of our existence that we aren't going to purposely work to defy their expectations, but that an openness of expectations will be necessary to have a true appreciation of where we're coming from. And that, part of that has to do with how the music changes from record to record, but it also has to do with things like who you choose to tour with. I never wanted to be one of those bands that just toured with other bands that sounded and looked like the band I was in.
Right.
I don't like that from an audience perspective, and I never wanted to do that from a band perspective. I mean, certainly there were times where, we were touring with predominantly other heavy bands and mostly male or mostly white bands, but by and large, there has been an effort through many of the projects I've been involved with to say, hey, we don't want to exist in this narrow stylistic realm, this narrow demographic socially. This is supposed to be avenue for true expression and experimentation on many levels. So I'm I'm not only comfortable with that, I embrace that. And you know, you lose people along the way. That for some people, that's a form of brand suicide. But I was never, my motivation for doing music was never to create um, uh, career stability. I'm glad that I've been able to tour as much as I have. I'm extremely grateful for that. I'm grateful that there are people who have given me opportunities to release my records and all those sorts of things. However, um, I would much rather have the ability to say what I need to say as an artist than have to capitulate to the idea of audience expectation and ultimately commit creative suicide.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, actually, there's a funny story I've told before on the show that involves you, and it was, I don't remember the year anymore, but it was a long time ago, maybe 2008, 9. I went to see ISIS in Gainesville, Florida. You guys were
Uh-huh.
playing. You guys were playing with Torch and Intronaut,
Uh-huh.
and I was standing in the crowd watching you guys, and somebody yelled out something. I think it was a song title. And you just turned and looked at the audience. You're like, if you don't like what we're playing, you can go home. I was like, man, yes, awesome, exactly. Like, dude, you don't need to conform. Like, it's. You've heard other artists talk about it. Like, everybody wants you to play that one song that, like, that they connected with, and maybe you've played it so much that you just don't even want to play it anymore. And you should be free to make that choice. Like, you don't have to conform to what, like, this entitlement of like, I paid money, I want to hear that one song. You know what
Well,
I
I
mean?
mean, there's bands that do that.
Yeah.
You can find those bands. Go to that show. I'm a big believer in the idea that if the artist is truly committed and connected to what they were playing, that will come across as enjoyable energy and experience for the audience. I can't think of the number of times I've seen bands, including bands that I loved, get up on stage and just go through the motions, playing songs maybe that even that I wanted to hear, and just been like, damn, that sucks. You know,
Mhm.
like these people are not into what they're doing. They are just going through the motions, and that's to me, that's worse, far worse than not hearing the song I want to hear. And there have been times where I've gone to see bands and they're playing songs I've never heard before, and those have been the best live experience of my life. And I realize that this is a matter of perspective. I know that people need different things from music. I'm just talking about what motivates me personally.
Right.
But I really do think that there is something to be said about the energy that an artist has in relation to their own work that is a big part of the engagement for a member of the audience. I mean, if you're thinking even of something like a song that really impacted someone from any given artist, when that song came into being, I would say most times it was because it meant something to the person that was making it. They felt inspired by it at the time they were making it. That's why it became a powerful song. That's why it affected other people who came into contact with it. And, you know, maybe there are people who can play the same song over and over again and remain engaged with it. I also feel that people and artists should be allowed to let old material die if they don't remain connected to it anymore.
Yeah.
And as I said, you're never going to please everyone. There's no possible way to do it. And I think it's far more likely that you will retain true engagement with your listeners by doing stuff that is meaningful and real rather than, you know, just trying to perfect your brand consistency.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you completely. When I've I've surely have fallen victim to that, stupid mentality of, um, going to a show and then leaving, going, "Ah, I wish they would have played that one song." But
Yeah, who doesn't?
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, yeah.
But I'm not going to yell at the band like, I want my money back. Um, I wanted to dig a little deeper into your creative process because you're putting out this new Sumac record that I assume was written or worked on prior to the pandemic,
Yep.
and there's also new Old Man Gloom coming out that you've been working on as well, right?
We had those new records come out in May. So there's
Okay.
nothing. Yeah, there's nothing else new forthcoming. We had an EP that we released as a benefit thing back in May or June, but that was also from the same recording session. So we don't have anything else new in the works. So yeah, the thing most imminent on the horizon is the Sumac record.
Correct. So, but I wanted to dig in, not on the creative process during the pandemic, but just kind of before and overall throughout your career, since you're very vocal about being straight edge and not experimenting with drugs or anything like that, which is kind of a driving force for a lot of artists that you see in the metal realm and whatnot. Um, and for someone like yourself that has so many projects and art, where do you go? What's your well for creativity? Like, how is it that what do you use as influence or inspiration, I guess, to kind of write all this music and
Uh,
art?
I'll just clarify one thing. I would not construe myself as being straight edge. I did at one point in my life, but I definitely went through a period of about a decade of smoking a lot of weed
Okay.
from around 2000 to 2010.
Okay.
And I would even say there was a time where I was an advocate of weed smoking in terms of how it facilitated the creative process. Um, at this point in my life, I am essentially sober. I will smoke weed maybe like once or twice a year and then be reminded of why I don't do it anymore when I descend into a pit of paranoid
Anxiety.
self-consciousness and like queasiness. But generally speaking, I prefer to be sober, and I feel like my life as it is now would not be able to exist if I weren't sober. So that again is my personal perspective. I am not going to deny that the use of substances has had an impact on music and art of all forms. It's very clear that in many ways people arrived at another plane of consciousness through the use of drugs or whatever else. I can also say for myself, the most radical music I have made and the most intense experiences I have had as an artist have happened when I've been sober. And it's been almost an unspoken mission of mine to be able to, or to attempt to attain different levels of consciousness, different states of being through kind of like the meditative process of creation rather than trying to facilitate that process by altering my consciousness. Um,
I think that's what I was trying to get at. Like, do you meditate and think about those types of things? Because uh, if you're not using the substance to alter your perspective, then there's got to be like you definitely got to be thinking about where this is coming from. Like some people say, oh, I'm channeling some kind of muse, or I'm channeling some kind of other dimensional being that's kind of going through me, and I'm letting it out. Like, what do you attribute it to?
I definitely would look at it as a process of channeling. I don't subscribe to a specific set of spiritual beliefs, but I do believe that there is something beyond sort of the material world that drives us and drives the creative process. And if I had to define it more clearly, I would say that there is some form of energy that people are channeling when they are creating. And their personal set of filters is what gives a particular shape to what they are channeling. So it's almost the idea that who we are as people informs our ability to shape and give form to something that already exists. And for me, that's always been the process in writing, especially when I've written something or played something that feels truly compelling. It's like the thing was already there. I just had to open myself up enough and be willing to receive it and use my corporeal body as a tool to manifest that. And I'm also a big believer in the idea that your physical body does have a lot to do with how these things take shape. I think, the way that you feel the music in your body, what particular frequencies resonate with you, how you hear things, the shape of your limbs, all of those things, I think, have a lot to do with how the music takes its final form. And again, as I said, though I'm not a practitioner of a particular religious order, in all of the things that I've read or heard about religious, or maybe even more importantly, spiritual experience, this idea of transcendence, this idea of the dissolution of the sort of conscious practical mind and the connection to some sort of more I don't even know, divine energy. For me, the truest and deepest experience of that has always come through playing music. And I would say maybe only happened through playing music. There have been other experiences like, seeing my son being born that I feel like carry me to a similar place or have a similar kind of energy. But just in terms of like an intentional act of doing something in order to break through that conscious thinking mind to another level of existence, has come through music for me. And that's always been my hope too, in writing a song or in playing a show, is to get to that place. And that's often been my guide in playing music too. Like if I feel like I'm playing something and it takes me to that place and the idea becomes less voluntary and almost is just presenting itself to me, that's when I know I'm on the right path.
Yeah, I feel that in your music, and I think that's why I'm such a fan of your work and everything. I was always the same way. I addressed it a little differently, and took a lot of substances myself. I smoked a lot of weed. I used to take LSD and mushrooms and all that stuff. But when I used to make music with my old band, it was it always felt like I wasn't really conscious of what was happening. It was just happening.
Yeah.
And then I would I would drink and smoke to kind of balance myself out, to not freak out about the fact that I'm not really even in control of what's coming out of my mouth. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'd be like, I would numb myself down to kind of just be like, let it happen, let it out. And I even now, like, it's been 4 years since we stopped making music and playing together, but I go back and I listen to the records and I'm like, I don't remember coming up with that at all.
Yeah.
Like, it still doesn't feel like I did that. It feels like I definitely spewed something out,
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with musicians that actually sit and write music and notes and everything. Like, a lot of prog bands do. A lot of the, techie prog bands, they sit there and they type it all out, and this is exactly what I want out, and that's fine. But I also don't feel that strong of a connection with that type of music. Like, for me, I appreciate the talent, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. But I still always go back to bands that feel more like they're just, letting it out.
Yeah. I would admit, I would follow that up by saying that I think they're going back to what I said earlier, music serves a lot of different purposes for people. And I think there is something to be said for more calculated composition. And I'm also just thinking about certain people that I listen to, like, some of the modern 20th century composers, Xenakis or Morton Feldman or people like that, and their process in some ways was very academic. I mean, they were writing these things out. However, I think that the writing process in a lot of ways was the set of tools that they learned in order to be able to express these ideas that might not have been able to take shape without those tools. Like you can't have a specific presentation of an idea for an orchestra. If it's a piece of music that you're hearing, you can't just ask an orchestra to improvise that piece for you and have it come out the way that it exists in your head. So you have to be able to write the stuff out. And so in a lot of ways, I'm not discounting composition by any means. I think the way that I look at that is almost the same way as that I look at my own practice, is that, again, people are channeling something. And in the case of people who know how to write notation or who are geared towards writing, on a more, if you want to say it this way, a more traditional way, they are using their set of filters, which includes the ability to write music and create notation and think of multi-instrumental parts because of the tools they've been able to accumulate, and that is part of their filtering process for whatever this other thing is that is coming through them. And again, I realize many people would not subscribe to that idea, but even thinking back to someone like some of the more revered composers, they were often proponents of the idea that they were compelled or even commanded by or inspired by God in order to do what they were doing. And they were struck, and in some cases even afflicted, by this work that they needed to do. It had to come out. They were driven insane until they were able to write these things out and complete them. And I think that again just speaks to the process of being tuned into something else. And I think there's a lot of different ways to look at it, what that can mean for people on an individual level.
Yeah. And I think people need to explore that more too. Just there's the urge to kind of label people. Like I've tried to talk about this kind of thing with certain folks that when I bring it up, they're like, "Oh, well, you're an atheist, or you're Buddhist, or you're this or that." And I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm just going off of what I'm seeing and feeling, and I don't, particularly like you, I don't agree with any particular set of rules or religious group, but I think we should explore a little bit more as to what it is that feeling that we're receiving. Like, is it, extra dimensional beings that are, projecting some kind of message on us? Is it aliens? Like what is it? And we should be exploring that. I think at least a little bit. Somebody should be, like, some kind of school or official. It shouldn't just be the psychedelic users. It shouldn't just be the potheads like me that are sitting around like, man, what is that? Like, there should be some kind of official looking into that thing, I think.
Well, I think that what that points to kind of gets back to an earlier point in our conversation, which is the idea of a shared humanity. We can look at the things that are universally true for everyone. And part of that might be thinking about the stuff that sort of exists outside of our ability to really grasp what it is, yet it can still be something that we're aware of and thinking of, and maybe trying to find a way to use in order to, have greater understanding and connection between us, and not only between people, but our connection to the world in general.
Yeah. Going back a little bit to music, just so we can start wrapping up, because it's almost an hour now. Sumac's new record, you plan on doing something? Because obviously it's hard to answer that, considering we don't know what's going on in society right now, and you don't know when venues are going to open up. I know some people are doing drive-through shows, which I don't care for. I'll just watch YouTube videos for that.
Yeah.
But do you have any plans of some kind of performance? And not to just poo-poo on everybody that's trying to do something. Like, I give my hats off to Jordan and the 2 Minutes to Late Night crew and everybody out there, Steven. They're putting out some really great stuff with the collaborative covers and stuff. But for the most part, I haven't seen a whole lot of creative things. And I think with your artistic background, I think you could put something really interesting out that's kind of experimental and artistic, but I don't know if you have something like that planned.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, part of my problem, and this goes back to the beginning of our trying to even make this conversation happen, is my limited grasp of technology. I don't think of things in terms of technological possibilities. That's a limitation of mine. So, I realize that technology can facilitate some things that might help us have at least a stopgap in this time where we can't really gather together in order to experience music collectively. But I can't really conceive of what that would be. And for me, there isn't a substitute for being in a room with other people and experiencing music together. I
Yeah.
love playing music on my own. I love, just writing in the studio by myself, our home studio. But, that's I can't live that way indefinitely. So I'm trying to find ways to highlight the creations that I've been a part of with other people right now, like, for example, talking to you, or posting things online, just to continue the process in whatever way I can, hoping that we will eventually get to a place where we can have shows again. And if it's a couple more years, then what I'll probably do is just keep writing music and get together and hopefully in some way or another with my bandmates. The American Canadian border is still closed, so Nick and I can't play together, but hopefully that will open up even before the pandemic ends, or tapers off. So I could imagine, say, this time next year, or perhaps even sooner, that Nick and Brian and I might start working on more music. And for me, writing with those guys and playing with them in a practice space would be enough, certainly enough, for me to continue to feel invigorated and make me want to keep going. I miss shows, there's no doubt about it. And that was, for me, at the beginning of this whole thing, part of the freak out was just like this successive canceling. Like, okay, spring stuff is canceled. Okay, summer stuff is canceled. Okay, fall stuff is canceled. Oh shit, next year, who knows? So that's been disheartening. But yeah, my need to create is and my life up to this point has been unceasing. So I'll find a way to make it happen. And there's, aside from the Sumac record, I've got records with other projects coming out this fall and early next year. So just, I'll find ways, and I'll connect with my friends, and we'll do what we can to keep that ball rolling.
Yeah. No, I feel you, man. As I get older, technology is kind of, I'm getting lost in it, and I'm starting, I'm seeing that, like, oh wait, that's what my, the parents and the grandparents were going through. Like, I had to explain to my grandfather before he passed away what GPS was.
Yeah.
He was like, well, how do you know where you're going? I'm like, I have this thing. It tells me where to go. He's like, but how does that work? I'm like, satellites. He's like, what? I'm like, so
Yeah.
I'm kind of feeling that with the like the streaming culture stuff. Like this is great. I can have a conversation with you, and Skype records it for me, and then I just post it on YouTube. But I see kids or even musicians. I see like bands like Between the Buried and Me or whatever doing live streams on Twitch, and then having people donate money and all this stuff. And I don't even know where to start with that. So
Yeah.
it's rough.
Yeah, and I really just don't think technology is not at a spot right now where it's capable of being a true substitute for what we've experienced. And I will also say that I don't believe it ever can be. Bodies in a room together creates an energy that cannot be transmitted through Wi-Fi. And there is no substitute for standing in front of an amp and feeling the resonance of the sound moving through your body. There is no substitute for the eye contact between me and another person, and that sense of connection that comes through that by being in the same place at the same time. And albums are great. Albums are how I first experienced music. Being alone in my room or in a car or whatever and hearing an album is great, and there's a whole other level of experience that happens through that. conversely, there isn't a way to substitute anything for live shows, and there isn't something that I think should. I think people since the inception of people have gathered together communally as part of their experience of being alive, and even out of necessity. I mean, it's what we need. It's a tribal instinct.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I agree with you. Like you said, the albums are a whole different, to me, it's a different experience. Like, I don't even count it as the same thing. Like, I saw you guys here in California. I think it was Glendale, maybe. It was a small venue. I forget the name, but they're no longer open, not just from the pandemic. They closed before that. But it was kind of like a hallway, a very thin, narrow hallway, and you guys were at the end of it. And I had not heard you guys live. I had only heard a couple songs online. And when that song, "The Thorn in the Lion's Paw," started, and that initial like that heavy, chord, the entire room shook. My entire body was like, "What? What is that? Why is that so loud?" And everybody was just kind of nodding, and it was a very primal kind of like, "Okay, we're tuning into a different frequency," and that, yeah, there's no substitute, and there's no substitute for performing either. Like I've said this before a bunch of times. Like, I've never felt the same way that I felt when I was on stage singing and playing and performing music. It's just there's nothing. There's no drug. There's no drug. None of them. Heroin, whatever the hell you're into, none of those are gonna make you feel that. It's just the one experience, But dude, I really appreciate you taking some time. I've been wanting to get you on for a while, and it's cool that it happened. Pick up Sumac's May You Be Held, and that's going to be on your label, right? Hydra Head?
Nope, this is on Thrill Jockey. They've done our last few records. My partner Faith and I have a label called Siege, and we're doing the tape version, but everything else is being handled by Thrill Jockey.
Okay. Yep. So pick it up on Thrill Jockey. Check out Hydra Head, though. You guys are putting out a bunch of stuff. I know you've been putting up artwork too on your social medias as well. Yep. Are you selling prints and whatnot?
Yep. Yeah. Most recently, artwork connected to the new Sumac record. So that's kind of the focus for the time being.
Yeah, and I looked up here the most recent Old Man Gloom seminars at 9 and 8, 8 and 9.
8 and 9. Yep. Yeah.
Those are out, and I don't know if there's any plans in the future. I'm sure you've been asked a million times for any kind of another celestial type of thing, but
don't think so. All of us are still friendly and in contact, but I think all the things that made us not functional towards the end are still there. And I think, honestly, it's been long enough now that for the most part, I can only truly speak for myself, but what I gather from the other guys is that, life has gone on and everybody is seemingly mostly content with where they're at and doesn't, feel the need to reanimate a corpse.
Yeah, that was certainly a thing that was happening a lot before the pandemic. A lot of bands were kind of like a lot of reunions and a lot of let's play this first album in its entirety and all that kind of thing. So,
well, I will say that I know enough to have the wisdom that the statement of saying you'll never do something is very dangerous. Yeah, I'm not just talking about reforming bands, but just playing any absolute in your life is not a prudent thing to do. So I won't say that it's an impossibility. I will say that for myself, I'm much more interested in my present. And again, just speaking specifically of Sumac, I feel like I've been working pretty hard to establish Sumac outside of my past accomplishments. And I want to continue on that path. And I feel like, going back to doing ISIS again would kind of undermine that to some degree. I mean, still, even though ISIS has been done for 10 years and, Sumac is on our 4th studio album now, a lot of reviews or things immediately start off with ISIS frontman Aaron Turner's band Sumac. And I'm just like, stop referencing it. That's
Yeah,
not
right,
it's
right.
not fucking relevant anymore. I get it. It's a tagline, brings people in, but it's just like, I want this thing to stand on its own.
Well, I'll make sure when I promote this episode, I only put Sumac. Don't worry.
You do what you need to do. Press and artists I've always had different ways of doing things. So I understand people need to do what they do. I'm just talking about my own desires, I guess.
Yeah, man. Well, dude,
Yeah.
I appreciate you. I'm looking forward to hearing more stuff from you. Stay safe and sane if possible, because I know how crazy everything is. That's how we started the conversation, which is how bananas the world is right now. But I think we'll get through it. I think
Yeah.
we've gone through some pretty messed up things in the past. I think we can get through this too. So.
I think so, and I hope you stay sane and healthy yourself. And we're all lucky to be part of an amazing community, and I feel really grateful to be part of the community I'm a part of. And I talk to my bandmates daily, and so we'll find ways to get through.
Yeah, man. Well, I'll hopefully see you soon, and I'm looking forward to the new Sumac record in its entirety too, because I only have that one track. But if you're listening again, pick it up, guys.
Thanks, Eddie.
All right, man. Take care.
Have a good one.